I think we're live now. So yes, welcome to the 7th edition of the Data Value Show. And today we're very excited to have Veronika Durgin from Sachs, who will be talking about, well, data modeling and how we boosting business value, busting limitations, and where data modeling fits into that. So without further ado, let me add Veronika. Welcome, Veronika.
Hey, Chris. Good to see you. Thank you for having me.
No problem. Always a pleasure. So a bit of background. So I think I first met you, Veronika, in Boston via an introduction with Joe. Joe was over, I think it was just after the COVID era and we were allowed to travel again. So it's normally the other way around. I normally get to speak to people digitally and then end up meeting them in person. But I think there's a unique one where we actually met in a bar, ended up obviously talking about data, especially with Joe and Matt being there. And ever since then, I think we've either met up in person at your Boston data meetups or bumping into each other, running each other past at the Snowflake events, and been on a few of shared podcasts. So today I think it's the first time we got a one-to-one. Normally we're shared with a panel with many people. So for the audience, you want to give yourself an introduction?
Yeah, that's right. I did meet you in person with Joe, and I was like, who's that crazy person? But oh, wait a minute. And at some point, you're like, let's stop agreeing with each other. But, brilliant minds think alike and all that. So always great conversations. And then I think I've mentioned that when I shared my LinkedIn post that every conversation that we have is well, fun. I don't think I've ever had a non-fun conversation with you. I walk away learning something, but also like, my God, this is like the best hour I've spent, but also very pragmatic, right? Both of us been around for a while. Not going to say how long, but it's been a while and we've seen it all. And at this point, we kind of arrived to a conclusion that, when you have to get stuff done, you have to figure out trade-offs, right? But quickly about me. So, I've actually spent my entire career in data. I fell into data by accident, just like everybody else. When I started, there was no formal education in data. Loved it ever since, been in very different roles. My growth into my current role was like I took a technical path, less technical, unfortunately, now, more in leadership, but still very much enjoy hands-on. I learn hands-on, so I'm very visual, and you probably hear from conversation. I like to watch, I like to try, and then maybe I'll read a book. So I kind of like the books are usually for me to fill in the gaps. Yeah, that's about it. Like I truly love what I do. So I think maybe that's why we kind of, related of just simply being passionate and over doing data and making sure that we do deliver value to our users. Otherwise, why do it?
Exactly. I think some words that just resonated is passion. And I've done posts about this. It's easy. It's easier job when you love it. And I think the natural journey of getting into data is different for everyone. But the same as you, I didn't have that formal education. But once I found it, couldn't get enough of it. And as I'll even talk about it in a pub at stag do's or anything. I think I've even sold a data strategy at a stag do once before, at a bachelor party. And now to get the vocabulary right, which side of the pond. But yeah, it's always been great having a conversation with you, and we're sharing the same journey of being there, seeing it back in the day, and seeing the evolution of it. And what I always like doing is sharing, maybe ranting sometimes a little bit about how it used to be and how some things have been forgotten, and the focus on data modeling that has had a big resurrection has been great to contribute with you on LinkedIn to discuss our views on this subject. So we've got a few, and we'll welcome questions from the audience as well. And I'm sure with the people that we've got there'll be some great ones. So, but we've got a few topics that we said we'd cover, and we can go off piece. We don't mind going off topic a little bit. But the first one is how does data model increase business value? And obviously, I've got a bit of a close relationship with business value. With one of my focuses, but With your experience, Veronika, how do you see the data model increasing business value?
Yeah, so this is like a very open-ended question, right? Like it's like, oh, let me hand wave a little bit. But I think let me kind of share how I think about it. So data without context has no meaning. It's just a bunch of stuff. And I can give you some interesting examples of like, seven, like what the hell is seven? Oh, it's day of the week. Okay, well, depending where you are, it could be Sunday, it could be Saturday. Oh, and by the way, if you look in Postgres, it counts from 0 to 6. There is no day seven. So context is important, and that's what kind of like data model provides that framework or context for your data. So there's that. It's probably more technical definition. The other value of, and I'm talking about probably conceptual logical model, is it encourages you to talk to your business partners. So you are actually, and I talk about it a lot, but that's what, by the way, is difficult. You have to use your words, and you can't be a geek, but you have to go and you have to talk to people where you might not actually have a lot in common with them, but you have to create something very simple, understandable, and you have to have the conversation. So talking about that logical conceptual model is actually what's forcing you to have the conversation. The other thing is once you have it in, I don't know, on a napkin, hopefully not, then this is so it's a little bit self-documenting, so you don't have to create 20 pager. Like I'm getting, and again, like if anybody's there by the book, you probably hate me right now, but this is kind of like a practical reality, right? um, so you have that diagram, now everybody can reference it, right? So now we establish common language. Also, when something is written, it's easy to realize the gaps and adjust it. When you show up without anything, people won't give you anything. But when you give them something, they're happy to comment in all the ways this is wrong, right? So it's like modeling it in and they're long terms. Like I hear, my God, I'm probably jumping and we have a whole hour. So
Don't
I
worry.
often hear that, oh, data modeling takes too long.
Mhm.
And we should probably have a conversation what taking too long is, but it's maybe it takes too long upfront, or longer, or you spend time on it. But like I've actually heard from somebody probably a year into my journey once and said, finally, I see the value of what you're building. Because every time you make changes to it, it takes you less and less and less time. And at some point, you actually probably covered a big chunk of your
Yeah.
business where each additional change, or you can go historically and kind of review, understand what the business's processes were like. So there's a lot of long-term benefits of doing, actually going through the step of modeling.
And I think something you just you mentioned there that resonated was, if everything does each modeling by an individual use case, you'll end up with 400, 500 use cases, and there'll be overlap and the numbers won't match up. And I think this is where having that data model to translate use cases onto a model that will actually satisfy them. And there's actually value in having a wrong data model, actually having someone to say, no, it's not like that. It doesn't always work like that in this scenario. Okay, well, now I found a new scenario. But if I hadn't have had something to say it didn't work, you don't
Mhm.
generate the conversation to work out how to refine it. So yeah, I think there's that pragmatic approach, and people saying that data modeling takes too long. I think it takes too long if you wait for it to be perfect. And as with everything, nothing's perfect.
And it never will be,
No.
because your business is not static.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you will never get to 100% done. Like businesses, new, lines of business come online, businesses change, they change how they do things, they change things like how they interact, they buy other companies. Like data model is never done.
No.
And like one of the things that was like, so the other thing, like I think a ton, like I worked at different industries. I'm not an expert. So when I walk in, having kind of like this high level model helps. But also having conversation with business. I worked for a company, like to this day it's stuck in my head. I worked for a company that was in agriculture technology space, and we were doing like commodity trading and farmers. And that's like completely out of like, so we writing software and great. And one of the analysts, which I still think probably he went by data scientist, but like one of probably the most brilliant data people I've ever met,
Mm.
he actually got in touch with a farmer and had a conversation around like what's happening,
Yeah.
crops sold, blah. And he identified a gap in our application because we completely missed the business step
Yeah.
of what actually happens. He wasn't like, oh, like whatever, technology jargon. No, he just went and he talked to the farmer and he asked him how and him, because most farmers are like, I'm being a little bit stereotypical, but so he asked them like how the process, what happens when crops collected, where it goes, and to like boggles my mind.
Yeah.
It was incredible. Yeah.
I think that links down to business processes, even though probably the farmer didn't realise he was actually following a business process, and it was all documented in his head. Why did you do it? Because for generations this is what
Yep.
we did. But to have that actually mapped onto the steps required to achieve that, from farm to your plate journey,
Yep.
and what data or what information was relevant at each of those points. An interesting client that we worked for once, I can't name the name, but they were doing analysis on the grass that was there to work out what was the best grass to feed the cows, and then there was analysis of how many worms they found per square foot or square meter of grass, indicated that the soil was good enough for the grass. So but maybe farmers have been doing that for a while, but you wouldn't have known that was something that would be information that would add value. So
Right. And
which
it's
yeah,
part of the process, right? Like, and that's why for us as data professionals, it's very important that we do have that conversation, understand the business process at the highest level. Like, now we don't have to talk about data types. We just have
yeah,
to like things and how these things interact with each other. Like literally on like a napkin is fine, just
yeah.
translate it into something a little bit more permanent at some point.
Yeah, and that data type thing is an interesting is, us data people, and we've all been we'd argue over whether to have a timestamp with a time zone or have it UTZ or separate. And at the end of the day, the client or the business doesn't really care. They want to be able to report on the point in
Yep.
time it happened based on the location it happened on.
Yep.
That's all they need to be able to tell you. And I think then us having some standards, and that we say, okay, we don't need to involve everyone in that. This is how we work. How does those business requirements fit into that?
Yep.
It'll make the data world less, or the mean data streets less mean, as we like to
I know.
say.
I was like, you don't have any black and blues on your face. Mean these streets were good this weekend. No fighting.
Exactly. So we've got an interesting a comment from Christopher. He's got a couple on there, so I'll just pick this one up because dimensional modeling seems a bit of a lost art in the modern data stack. So, I have to agree that I think that was probably a couple of years ago. I started seeing some posts out there saying modern data stack's dead because it didn't have any data modeling. And my view is it's not the modern data stack's fault that we've forgotten it. I cut my teeth at Cognos, so dimensional modeling was inbred in, engraved in my brain from an early age. But interesting question is we talk about different styles. It's one of the topics we've got on here. We've probably got a different order of dimensional modeling, of Kimball as it was known as, and I still think it has a role. But where do you see that that in the Snowflake community you speak to? Do you see that as a common thing now, or are people focusing on dimensional modeling again?
So that's a great comment in this one. Cubes are kind of coming back as well, which uh for good reasons, right?
Mm.
Like there's time and space. So dimensional model. I grew up with dimensional model. I didn't know there were any other ones.
Mm.
Kind of like in my career in the US. Turns out there are other ones that are very much applicable and useful in specific situations. I agree that BI tools forced us into dimensional models, or at least some of them, but I think that's actually a bad thing. I think you should pick the model that satisfies, basically optimizes. I think at the end of the day, honestly, sure, we can still microbatch our data, but at this point, everybody wants data as fresh as possible.
Yeah.
So whatever gets you that data, a great example, clickstream data. If you put dimensional model on it, it's misery even getting to that point, right? So,
It's too
so
late by
perhaps
then. It's too late by the time we get to it. Yeah.
exactly. It's like, yeah, you can't react to like you can do after the fact analytics, which is fine. So I am also surprised and shocked when I hear talks like talking about modern data stack of like, oh, hey, there's a dimensional data model and you can use it. I'm like, wait a minute, isn't that like, that should be like a fact. That's like foundation known, right?
Yeah.
Like at this point, we should be discussing how to improve dimensional model, not discovering that it exists, right? So I agree. I agree that modern data stack, as wonderful as it is, it removed the need to do any sort of pre-computation, pre-transformation, because we had this somewhat seemingly unlimited power of compute. Now we're back to where we are forced to be cognizant
Yep.
of how we use it to make sure that it's fast and cost efficient.
Yeah. I think something as you were just mentioning there is where we forced. So I think the BI vendors probably were reacting to how the databases at that time worked as well. So they with the XAs or the MPP appliances, they work better when data was modeled in that way. And in the BI tools, obviously the metadata in there, it allowed you to do that like drill down, drill up sort of analysis on data that's with SCDs, as we know, slowly changing dimensions that will be able to give you the right attributes at the right time. But I mean, other methods we used back then was driven by that was doing snowflaking. So like you didn't want to have to go and change the surrogate keys on the core attributes of dimension, but you snowflaked it for ones that were
it's like we normalization, all these kind of like patterns of modeling were honest, I think primarily folks forced because of limitation of hardware, right?
Yeah.
Like we had to be very optimized in order to take like squeeze as much as we could out of the servers that we've had. Cloud remove all that. So people stopped doing it, became lost art. I think we're back to being forced to do that.
I think so. And I think the byproduct of us being forced to that before is it added that business context. So you had to understand how it was going to be consumed. So you made sure it was modeled in a way that the business understood. So it had to relate to the business. And I think we went too far when we had that big data bubble, when it was a scheme on read, we'll sort it out later. The problem was when that mass was there, it was too hard to sort out because the horse is bolted. You can't go and have that conversation with the business to understand that data now because either those people aren't in the business anymore or the business has moved on. So now your data model has changed over time. It doesn't actually relate to how it was. So the data becomes unusable. And this is where we can touch on some other data modeling techniques. I am a fan of DataVault in certain scenarios as well. And I know that you speak. You're involved in that area of modeling as well. And I think it's that abstraction layer. And I think dimensional modeling gives you an abstraction that means that you can move the reporting tool from one to another, maybe, or you could have reusability on shared dimensions, conformed dimensions that could be across multiple facts. So you had abstraction or building blocks to provide you that flexibility of any change of the data that's coming in before you can expose it. And I think going to the other end of having multiple source systems at the same time. We've worked on large transformation projects where the new system hasn't been built yet, or is being built, whereas you've got 3 old ones you're migrating to it, and you need the reporting up and running, and people need to be able to validate the reconcile data coming across on both. How are you able to do that without having an abstraction away from the source systems you're working on? And that's where I think DataVault provides that unique sort of approach. When would you sort of like push down the DataVault approach rather than maybe an Inmon style or an enterprise style approach?
So I would say like for dimensional model is a good consumption layer.
Yep.
And part of it's because, BI tools work really well with it. I think people also understand it really well, but I think it has some constraints that I think part of why dimensional model exists. Again, it was created back when we had hardware limitations, right? DataVault is, and hopefully nobody kills me for saying that, to me, it's a business focused, organized data lake. It's insert only, you take all of your data, so you have your audit, you have history, and because it's organized by business concepts, you are source system independent.
Yep.
So you can like, and again, like as you start thinking about when to use DataVault, obviously, if you have various source systems, if you're, you know, migrating from one to another, it's very easy, it's super adaptable, it's very agile. But if you're a startup, if you're just starting and you can't even honestly really define your business concept, that is absolutely not the right approach for you. I think at that point, just take whatever source data you have, do transformations on top of it, and just at least establish some sort of reporting. But hopefully you'll come back and revisit it, to formalize it when you get there.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's the right approach at the right time for the right scenario.
Yeah.
And
And it's like, I think the other important part is you actually, for any approach, you have to go back, iterate, improve, make changes. I think we all forget to do that. And I'm sure you've had many conversations. They're like, it's just a POC. I'm like, do you know how many POCs became production?
Yep.
Every single one of them.
Yeah, and I think there's a good comment here, which is again from Christopher. We'll get on some other ones as well. Is doing that upfront modeling? Means it saves you time afterwards, and that iteration of like doing, but it's the right amount of upfront. You don't wait for everything to be there. Get a version up that supports one department. And the problem with all of these shadow IT or multiple parts of the business all trying to solve the problem, and I understand why. It's down to frustration. The company's not moving quick enough, or people believing, rightly or wrongly or naively, that they can do it better themselves. The downside of that is you're not combining your combined power or capability as a company in the best way, and you will get the scenario where no one's trusted, and it'll be a them and us for so long of who people have emotional attachment to what technology they used, and your company won't progress. So anyone out there that thinks that they're going to save another shadow IT, I think don't. Try and work with the data team, let them know what's going wrong, and work collaboratively, because at the end of the day, your company will benefit much more from that rather than doing things in silos.
And to kind of reply to Christopher, because there are some data models about too. So, and it's like, I don't, everything you've described, Chris, is a people process problems.
Yep.
There isn't a perfect solution for it. It just kind of working through it. I've seen some bad models. I've seen some no models. I've seen it all. I think it's important to kind of like establish whatever the pattern that works is for your team, for your company. And I think the very important part is acting fast in the feedback loop, right? Like agility, like adapt whatever version of agility works for you. Again, I'm sorry, not by the book, but I worked at so many companies and every company did agile and they all did different versions of it. But whatever works, limit, put time boxes, 2 weeks. Don't spend more than a week on a data model, then spend a week on writing, script to load one source, give it to your users. They'll give you feedback. It's like excuse that I hear all the time for not modeling is because it takes too long.
Yep.
It shouldn't.
No.
It actually can't, because you'll spend so long, you create a model that's not working.
Yeah, it's short-sightedness, and I think this is where I have issues with Agile not giving time to address technical debt. So, if there's a data project going on and you're running in sprints, you need to make sure that you don't load up one of those ones and actually get it to doing a address data modeling. Look across the different trains if you're running scaled, or the different Scrum teams. Have that collaboration time and just bring the stuff together, because the quicker you do that, the less technical debt you build up. The quicker you can react to remediate any activity or remediate anything identified. I suppose that leads on to a data ops approach, of having the ability to have those releases, be confident to actually doing those releases of change the data model, that you don't break other dependencies. And I suppose it's not so much data modeling a way of working, but it's your people process, making sure that you're able to release something to a test environment, get the users in there, do that wrangling or something, validate it, get that feedback loop, and keep going around until you've got a stable version that they can build a production business process of. So we've got another question here, which from JJ. So there had to be a while till we got an LLM or a generative AI question. So okay, so large. So what's the question here?
How do you reconcile it into dimensional model? But do you really need to?
Yeah, I mean, for my view of LLMs is, okay, you need it to understand how to write the SQL, but to go and get the data. So if the LLM's been trained on a good data catalog that describes the entities that are there for it to query, and if the model also understands any relationships that have been defined, hopefully with primary keys or foreign keys, it would be able to write the SQL required to go and bring that data in. So
So maybe you have a use case, like specific use case you had in mind. I unstructured, semi-structured data, nothing wrong with that at all. Having good metadata is super important. But then, do you really need dimensional model? Again, it's a specific use case.
Yep.
It's not you must have it everywhere. Not at all.
No.
As a matter of fact, have it where it makes sense, but don't have it where it doesn't make sense.
Yeah. I mean, you were talking about the last night. We're keen followers of ThoughtSpot. We like their product, and it's the same thing they've been doing. Well, not with LLMs before, but it was typing in a question and it converting that to give you the insight.
Yeah.
I see the next level, and I think that's probably I know that's where they're going, and probably other tools doing it. It'll be that Google style. Google. In fact, I did a post that upset some people about what I think UX is going to look like. I said that it will just be a prompt box. I said that UI is dead. I said, but I think that's where it would go. You'll get a single prompt and ask. Well, not about ask Jeeves. It'll be
I was one of the people that was unhappy about that too. Or sad. I wasn't unhappy. It was just very sad. It's a very sad world if all we come down to is just a text box. Back to those terminals when we could only type.
I think there was a bit tongue in cheek with that one. I do like to poke the bear sometimes and just to see what's out there. But
starting fights on the mean data streets. I see
exactly. How it is. It's good entertainment as long as no one's harmed. That's the main thing. But I think it's reinventing how we're going to start querying these things. So I think even in products as well. So I'm not plugging all the vendors around, but we work with SQL DBM, which is a great data modeling tool that allows that sharing and collaboration. But if you think, if you can go and get some default data models out there that will give you a good 80% or 80-20 fit to what you need to achieve. I've seen what ChatGPT can generate for a data model for example, an e-com company. It does a good job. It's not a bad starting.
That's an interesting. Common data models existed forever.
Yep.
They never succeeded.
No,
So I think a common data model is a good place to start, but it is absolutely not what should be using at your company.
no.
I would say it's also not a replacement for you to not talk to your business to understand how they work with business process within your org. So it's like, it's been very, you can actually Google it, like Microsoft has common data models that you can absolutely look at. But again, it's like they never really succeeded.
No, I saw them as patterns. I mean, and they were certain data models, and this is going back into OLTP days when I was doing stuff on a payment company. We had to get, back then it was 15,000 transactions per second. You know, it was like, yeah, that was some achievement. But yeah, there was, you would know that to achieve that, you had to have an event right based only model, which would have any different attributes that differed from that core event entity, would have to be hung off it. That was the only way of achieving that sort of throughput. Was it a data model that actually represented the credit card transaction to report it? No, hell no. It was all the events that were associated to it. I mean, to go and get that into reporting, you had to merge up to 12 different events that had all happened together. So it probably goes on to what's the right model for the right requirements, which I think is again something that we've forgotten to do a little bit as well, of getting requirements. So it's probably mapped onto the, well, we've gone off topic. I'll go back to the second bullet we had.
Okay.
It was, should we map business processes onto data models? And I'm going to probably extend that a bit, is business process and the associated requirements to drive our data models.
Yeah. So, and I had, you know what I had actually written? What is your definition of a data model? Right? Like, because there's conceptual, logical, physical, there's relational, network dimensional, DataVault graph, there is ML. So there's, we like, let's align.
Yes.
So I think that absolutely, yes, conceptual data model reflects business process.
Yes.
So the answer to that, like, absolutely, that's what you're doing. That's the whole point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think the problem we've had, though, I've only ever seen that done in large business transformation projects, is that it gets forgotten. It's gone. You know, no one ever maintains it, and that's one of the problems that gets. Well, we have to deal with that if you ever go and try and change something later, because no one knows. It's all in everyone's head that may have gone or documented on a Confluence page somewhere. It says on Confluence, but where? You know, whoever maintains that Confluence page, and do you know it's accurate still? So yeah, how do we think? How do you believe we can solve that problem of ensuring that there's enough focus as an organization to see the value in maintaining that?
So I know when you have something like this to reference, everybody loves it, right? Like when you're like, oh, how I wish, oh, wait, there's documentation I can read. You're like, awesome. But how do you now actually encourage people that should be writing documentation to write it? I think, to me, like, you either have a formal function, which not every company can afford to have, or it becomes a part of your process. You know, you create your sprints. Step 1, create a model or adjust an existing one, document it. Step 2, build it out. So, or like data dictionary, I've had, you know, like with my team and they kind of hate me, but I'm like, if there's no data dictionary, it doesn't go to production. If you can't explain what you've built, nobody's going to be able to figure out how to use it.
And I think that's an interesting point. There is the fact that as data people, we know there needs to be a data model, and you know, we can argue about what level and what documentation, but we know our model needs to have one. I think we could flip that around, and the business, not picking on the business, because obviously we all love you, business. You know, we're here to serve you, but it's like everyone in the business should actually know what they're doing in their role and what part of business process it fits in. And I think if the people in the business were able to understand that, where they fit into the bigger picture, and actually own that, And that is what they take to the business, sorry, the data teams when they want something. Look, I'm doing this part of the process. They go, oh, we know that bit. Oh, that's just before the bit over there that these people do. They do this, and you're able to have a better conversation. But I don't
But the
really see
question
that.
is, but who maintained it? So this is an interesting one. So let's see if we can maybe like disagree a little bit for fun.
Yeah.
So data model is opinionated, right?
Mhm.
So if data people create it, it's our opinion because then we're going to build to it. If people on the business side creates it, they give you their opinion to build. They're almost like solutioning it in a way. So I feel like they could own it, but I also feel like it has to be a collaborative thing.
Oh, it 100% has to be collaborative, but I think it's what you bring to the conversation.
Yeah.
And it's like what homework each side's doing. And
I agree with you, and I think kind of like
damn,
these
we
high
get an
level.
argument. We'll get an argument
Damn
one
it!
day.
All right, let's do a little fighting. Now I forgot what I was gonna say. If conceptual models aren't that hard,
Mm.
like, and I love John Giles' party models. Like, it's really like a thing, and what they do with other things. They're super easy. So I think, I mean, honestly, anybody can do it. And this is like a very, you know, absolutely involve other teams. It's not, we can't do data in a silo.
Yeah. And again, I'm thinking of one of the other topics that we said we may cover as well, which was that metadata-driven approach. And I think the more metadata we can capture, and if the business are capturing their business processes and that metadata in a standard way,
Yeah.
as data people are capturing our metadata in that standard way, understanding where to change, what to change, and the impact of change becomes a very, very easy activity. One of the things that we've been discussing with Matt Housley recently on some of our book chats that we have in preparation for the work we're doing is what's the business value in agility as a company, and with this ever-changing world, and who is at the FTSE 100, over the past time, the companies come and go, and the ones that normally come and stay are the ones that have that agility. And I think to any organization, if we're trying to establish a monetary value on our data models, and when I say data models, it is that collective term, the business processes, the conceptual, the logical, the physical, how, and a feature model or whatever. I'm not going to say DBT model. I don't include them. That's not a model.
Now we're gonna argue when you call DBT model a model.
It's not. I
That's
won't.
when we yeah.
We'll agree on that one. It is not another
It's
model.
not a
But
model. Yeah.
if you had all of that, if all the metadata there was allowing you to be able to make business decisions quicker, to be able to change or optimize a business process, your company is going to probably have more value as an entity, because how quickly your speed to market,
Yeah.
which goes back down to it's never 100% right, but and also what's right now may not be right in the future. So it's
And like
better to have.
agility,
Yeah,
right? Being able to do that is experiment. You
yeah,
can, because you like, it's smaller, more frequent changes. Making a boo-boo isn't as bad, right? So the blast radius of a change, like I love plan B, like if you were ever like, DBA, right? Like you always want to make sure you have a rollback plan or whatever that may be, or knew how to quickly fix it. Plan B, agility to me is like, you just kind of have plan B, right? Even if your change is minor, you can experiment quickly. You're okay to make a mistake
yeah,
because it's not a big deal.
yeah. I think something that slowed down that agility in organization. Well, there's a few, but one is security. I've seen quite a bit, and we need to, quite rightly, make sure that we are we do the right things to secure
Mm-hmm.
data for one, the company's ethics or moral or value as well, because it could have a negative impact, but also for the any regulatory or looking after their customers, and
Or
customer
you can
loyalty.
like lose your company IP. I think security is like a must. That's
Yeah,
not.
yeah,
It's not like there's no agility about security.
no, no.
You have to establish it before you do anything else.
And I've seen, and this it probably comes down to maybe the more physical modeling of certain things. I've seen too many people think, oh, I used to be able to see all this information before I still need it, and why? Oh, because I do. And sometimes people don't actually need to know, the full address of someone or date of birth or something like that. They actually just need the year or the age for age ranges or something like that for targeted marketing. They don't actually need to know the full details. So, I think making sure that the data model can satisfy the requirements, but also in a way that adds a level of security, appropriate level of security, that
And
doesn't
actually,
prevent agility.
DataVault has solution for that. You basically create surrogate key for any of your business keys, and then you can still do like uniqueness and counts, but you don't have to know who that is.
No.
Um,
Exactly. We've done some techniques using tokenization or encryption, or decryption, or obfuscation as well. So, and as you say, normally you just need to know that this is the same record over here as the same record over there, but you can't use the business key for it. So, it is. I've seen it is a bit of a bottleneck. I know with Snowflake and being a Snowflake superhero. If I haven't already mentioned yourself, you're
That's right.
yeah, all of the additional security stuff you can put on there with ABAC controls.
See, I want to say though, don't treat data security as a bottleneck.
No.
Think it's not. It's like this is your digital self on the internet. If you feel it as a bottleneck, it's like I'm going to pick on words. It has negative connotation. It's not. You actually want to work with a company that treats your data as their own, and like with respect, and make sure that like you're not going to leave your I don't know, Ferrari unlocked on the street with, I don't know if anyone has the keys. You won't. You want to make sure it's protected and secure, and then you'll work with those companies. So like picking on words a little bit, but it's not a bottleneck. You actually want to make sure that your security is well designed and handled appropriately.
Yeah. And I think I have seen it being used as a bottleneck because decisions, maybe it's more the people, the process means that it takes longer to get things done because you get security involved. But I have not all security teams, and it's maybe some. I have a term of policy to reality, or practical policy implementations. Is it's having the appropriate controls based on the risk profile, and if you take the worst case of everything, the best scenario is to lock data up, no one has access to it at all.
Well, this is the safest, right? Like if nobody can have access to it. No, I get it. And they're, obviously, right. We don't want to get into that rigid, well, it's always locked, you can't have access to it. But also, again, data, right? Like we're going into this, LLM, Gen AI world. Data, each company's data is incredibly valuable.
Yep.
Like, do you really want to give it to somebody for free? I mean, even if you don't care about your digital kind of presence and somebody's stealing your information from somebody, like from company perspective, right? This is potential intellectual property and something that company can, turn into a product. So yeah, I'm actually very like, I'm taking security clearly very, very seriously.
So I think it's a very broad one, and we've going through it, or we won't get through everything today. But the future of databases, and this is a very open-ended question, and I've got some views as well. So I'm gonna let you give your view.
Well, okay. Well, what's a database? It's just a container, right, where we store data. I am so whatever we have. I mean, relational, like kind of like mathematically at the hardware level makes sense. NoSQL or blob storage makes sense. I am looking forward to advancements in storage to see if there's potentially other opportunities. Also, interestingly enough, so the way the future is going, like we have a ton of data, right? We're going to run out of storage. We also go into the future where we need data right now, right this second. So we can't afford to copy it from place to place, transform it. So Like I think the future is interesting.
Yeah,
I don't think I think everything that exists will stick around. There's absolutely use cases for that, but I'm also looking forward to like innovations.
yeah. I think yeah, you name some sort of different databases. So we had the NoSQL, we had our relationals have changed shape to some degree. Separation from the computer storage, and we got now our the graph databases, or now
That's
the
right.
the vector databases. But I think they all boil down to just the hardware and how it's really stored, isn't it? Really. So,
Mm-hmm.
you said the blob is just used to store whatever you want.
Mm-hmm.
No SQL is a key pair database. So it is just storage, context, and the compute to go and query it where it is. I think you will find, and we've already started seeing this, multi-purpose, multi-functioned
Mm-hmm.
databases, that it becomes your Swiss Army knife
Mm-hmm.
of thing. I think stuff I've seen with single store, which is creating some of that abstraction to creating
Mm-hmm.
databases, especially to help with LLMs, is interesting, of simplifying that. We'll give you the best storage for the best purpose, and helping achieve that. Yeah, it is an interesting time, especially with the different chipsets coming out, and GPUs. And
Yeah.
we were chatting to someone the other day that was talking about putting these machines in minerals, that means that they run more efficiency, but lying them down in a rack. I think I hadn't talked about racks in database, or sorry, racks in servers for ages, and
Mhm.
I realised that I think it's all coming back now, with some of um, the people wanting to
Things
train.
just like come in circles, but I love like you. I think that this is a great point. Multi-purpose database.
Mm,
Again, we don't want to copy data all over the place. We can't. It's too slow. It's too expensive. So
ingress,
having
egress, yeah,
one place for all of it and one place that can manage various demands and various workloads. That's like I am certainly personally selfishly looking forward to that world.
yeah,
So I
yeah.
don't have to move data around.
Yeah, no, and yeah, I think again, going back down to that standard business processes that your company needs to operate as an operational system, and having to go and analyze on it.
Mhm.
That world it was only two worlds, for what two reasons? Because it needed different tech, and it was done by different teams. I think that world of the OLTP team sitting in the same room, working on the same data, working on the same data model at the same time, at the same requirements, having that conversation, you're both modeling how you extract it, is one happy family. That will make the mean data streets much less mean, and it'll stop that. Oh, the quality's their fault, or the quality's their fault, or
Yeah.
we can't do it because we're still waiting for them. We have a dependency. It is one team, one team, one system.
It's
It
like
does have
utopia.
data.
I don't know.
It might happen, but maybe not by the time maybe I might retired by then, but we'll see.
Yeah, kind of feel I might be dead by then, but
I was going to say that one first, but I didn't want to. I wanted to hope that maybe I'll sit
yeah.
before I
Uh,
finally.
I mean, honestly, I think there's a little bit of conflict of interest, when you work to deliver capability for an application, it's different from analytics of integrating data across various systems and creating something else. So that person who's responsible specifically, right, for your data modeling, how do they resolve that conflict of,
Hmm.
to support capability of an application is one thing, but to support analytics is completely different capability.
But it's the same data is being captured, so they should be able to. You're right. Have the right horses for courses. You
Yeah,
have the right pattern for the right scenario.
yeah,
But if that data model has been captured at the time where they're understanding what the OLTP requirements, understanding the speed, the cadence they need to send that across to satisfy the reporting requirements, another pattern. Yeah.
yeah,
Oh, you need that streaming pattern, that real-time
yeah.
replication pattern.
So and maybe what we're really saying is when we no longer have to use a specific data model for specific performance and hardware. When we have just one data model that works for everything, maybe then it'll be reasonable to
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. But I think this is I don't know if it's JT because it comes up LinkedIn user, so he'll confirm if it is, or does someone can deny. But yeah, self modeling database using AI and ML. Whoa, that'd be nice, wouldn't it?
Well, it means that it's data modeling based on the data that's recorded, and that's missing the whole concept
Business
of
use for the business.
documenting business processes. And then you rely on, again, when metadata is perfect
Yeah,
and data is perfect, yes, but or at least forget perfect.
yeah. I
Good
had a
enough, yeah.
Yeah, good enough. I mean that metadata thing, and I was had a chat with John Cook about this on one of our evening business meetings down the pub. He lives around the corner from us.
The best kind.
Yeah, but, and we were talking about that we've had this concept of putting in JavaScript or Pit agents to run on your applications to go and collect information. But imagine if you were collecting all those agents you put in every single part that your company interacts with, and you're able to track and capture the business processes and actually see how it all flows. It wouldn't be perfect, but you can go, right, from all that metadata capture, we see this flow of the information. This is where it starts. This is where it ends. Here's a starters for 10 of what we think your business process is.
But who writes that software? So a company that uses 200, 300 various different softwares, right?
Yeah, well, yeah.
And one of them does that, like it isn't really helping you. So if you're a software company, you're writing your own, you have a little bit more control over stuff like this.
Yeah.
But not every company is a software company.
No. You could put it for a proxy and have an agent that's captured it. But anyway, maybe this is an R&D night with a
I know,
couple
but then my point is like, okay, so it's all this additional compute, right? Like, and then how do you integrate these agents with some outdated legacy things that are like,
Yeah.
don't breathe at me, like I'm here, like.
Yeah, you brought me back to reality. I know it's never going to exist, but it'd be
Yeah.
nice.
Or even like it would even be nice if everybody collectively agreed on how to log stuff, like all the app and tool vendors. But that's also probably
Yeah.
not going to happen.
Yeah. I've got a whole this observability buzz or hype at the moment, and everyone I've spoken to, what you're observing, and no one can tell me they're observing the same things. And
I mean, we can't even, like, if you recall when Serge was
Mm.
writing his data modeling book, which was, by the way, amazing, on Snowflake, and you can skip the Snowflake part, don't worry, there's also data modeling, great concepts. He was asking about naming conventions. We can't even agree on naming conventions. So
True.
it's like,
Yeah, no, I've been there before. It's suffix or prefix on things,
yeah,
Is it 2
plural,
letters or 3
singular,
letters? Oh
yeah,
yeah. Oh god, yeah.
abbreviate, not abbreviate, spell out, long, short.
Yeah. Oh, that brings back some not fond memories of many debates with data teams I either worked with or inherited over the years.
Yeah. So it's like, to answer the LinkedIn question, self data modeling databases. I think, I mean, it's great on paper, but I don't know if there's.
It'll be a Gartner concept. It'll be a Gartner quadrant soon. It'll exist, I'm sure, but I don't. It may be a bit hype.
But then we get into kind of, yeah. Right, we'll probably. It's conversation that's better to have over a drink.
I think so. I mean, while we're touching on naming conventions, which is linked to, I know when setting these before is primary keys and foreign keys. Why is it such a foreign language for people? Do you think that a foreign key is useful?
I don't know. I I don't know. Or like another thing that's like grain of your data, like what is, and then which is the primary key, like what's you. I probably can go on a very long rant just being the DBA and people creating primary keys on some surrogate keys which have zero meaning.
Yeah.
Like no, like you can't actually validate uniqueness of your row, right? Like, and or how tables relate to each other, how to join them. Like, I don't know. I don't know. We're missing kind of like a basic just database.
Yeah, I think it's that evolution, and anyone that jumped into this or came into the data side from the analytics side from that big data era, they didn't indexes didn't exist. I mean, Snowflake for a long part, they didn't have primary key or foreign keys on it anyway.
Well, they're not enforced, right?
No,
Like
no,
they're purely metadata, and if you don't understand what they actually mean,
yeah.
then just saying, kind of like oh, it's a primary key, like it has no meaning.
True. And I know that even on the Oracle days when we used to have them on non-rely anyway, because the overhead of maintaining on bulk loads was too high. But having them there to know the optimizer, to understand, and not only that, that's data to be used by other things to get that metadata to actually add some context to it. And I think even the optimizer would benefit from it as well,
Yeah,
because you've given more context to the machine itself, that it's
yeah,
able to run
exactly.
it better. Um,
That's another lost art of tuning,
mm,
of tuning and optimizing. Maybe that's where LLMs will help. I don't know.
I mean, no,
Of actually, a query is not a query is not a query, right? Like you can write beautifully looking code that's absolutely horrendously performing.
yeah, and you're right. I think people forgot to go and look at an explain plan or the query profile, and
Yeah.
it just looks like a graph of connections. And
Hmm.
back in the day, again, I keep using that term, but the cost didn't mean cost. Cost of the query just meant how well it was going to perform. And if you had a big Oracle box or something, it didn't really matter if it wasn't too, if the cost wasn't that good, but it didn't cost you any more in physical money, at least. Whereas now, a Snowflake a bad query in Snowflake that's run very frequently has a physical cost to your company. So understanding the time and effort spent to do that is when it's worth doing, when it is worth tuning, and when it's not. And I don't think
Right.
people understand that as much as they should. So that's something to actually understand and optimize. Maybe there's a book need. I'm not sure if I didn't. Did Serge cover
I
that book?
so he covered a ton. Like I highly recommend reading. And the other part, like actually, I keep trying to figure out how to write a review. A big part of that book is actually anybody who's been in the data space for a while. You'll be like, things that you know are still very much applicable. Cloud is not magical.
Yeah.
It's still very much, physics and math is at play. So I highly recommend. But talking about a book, I'm a very visual learner. So I almost like wish there was like a series of short videos with like some sample data sets and just walking people through so they have maybe some code they can reference and use as samples, and also understand how to do these things. So Chris, maybe an idea for you. I don't know. I'll have to like
Yeah,
search. How about
I'll,
you do that?
I'll stick it on the backlog. But yeah, no, I think that would be useful. In fact, I met one of the meetups I was at the other day. Met a guy who works at Google. He was showing me stuff he was doing there, and I'm not Google's cost optimizer or explain plan. It needs explaining. So, and he was talking me through that. So, and I think the benefits of me coming from an Oracle background, SQL Server background, what Snowflake does, and it's the main time I'm ever using a database is that nowadays. It's understandable. You understand what it's doing. You understand where the overheads are. You understand how it could be a different route to do it.
Yeah.
But I think that's because of our background, not because the documentation showed us what we do, or it's been easy
Right.
to learn from
Yeah.
some content available. So yeah, maybe that's something to touch on. Well, we're nearly. I don't think we covered nearly everything, but and we got a couple of minutes left. I think only. Yeah, pretty much. We're not going to cover the last
So I
topic.
guess call to action, right? So
I think so.
how do we educate? Like this is what I've been struggling with. Again, books are incredible, and I think honestly, books are probably higher quality content than whatever's out there in the wild.
I
But
think we should do on Ethan's next low key conference. We can we're doing some online spitballing here. We can maybe, rather than we'll do a more constructive session where we actually talk about the art of optimization and why an explain plan can explain where you're going wrong.
I think should do some like samples and
Yeah,
walk people through.
yeah.
Which
So
like writing a bad query on purpose is actually very difficult.
Yeah.
Just so
Well, yeah, you just stick a cross join in it between a
yeah.
couple of
Cross
5 pm
apply.
tables.
Don't use any join columns. You'll be fine.
Yeah. Well, look, we're approaching it, and it's been an absolute pleasure, Veronika, and thank you for taking the time to come on here. And I'm sure we'll catch up again soon, if it's not virtually, maybe physically. If I'm there down in Boston, I'll give you a shout. But if you're down in New York or in London, give us a shout. So probably a bit of a shout out of what's happening next. So next week, got Ryan Dooley on the show from the Super Data Bros. He has some great content. I don't know if you've seen Veronika in the past. He has a much better jingle than us, but he's again ex-Cognos, so he understands the whole evolution of BI. So we're talking about that next week. And we've got Big Data London coming up next week, which unfortunately I know Veronika can't make it, so I'm just saying to make her get some FOMO. And I don't know when Ethan's got his next meetup. It may be this week, or sorry, next couple of weeks. So I may be at that one, so you'll catch me there. But if not, hope to catch you next week on the Ryan Show. And thank you again, Veronika.
Thank you for having me.
No problem at all. An absolute pleasure. Thank you.
Talk to you later.
See ya. Bye.